This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Ruch Mabam to the Koilel Iger de Pirka. With the learning should be Luchos for Shalema for Yitzchak ben Devira, Shavuos for Shalema, for Karoi B'Sel Shachal Yisrael.
Amen.
Okay, Rabbi Glatstein, as we approach Yom Tov of Shavuos, and we think about the day of Kabbalas HaTorah, I want to address this morning a very, very basic, fundamental question, something that I discovered very recently. Something that I was not aware of fully, or maybe at all, and something that will really enhance our appreciation for what Shavuos is, what Kabbalas HaTorah is, and really something that every Jew needs to know. Fundamental information. So anyone who's wearing a yarmulke needs to know this. Anyone who's Jewish needs to know this. Okay, we're going to start with a very basic question, and that is, we know that Hashem gave us the Torah. Yeah, we're all good with that.
Yeah.
Hashem gave us the Torah.
Yeah.
What day did Hashem give us the Torah? He gave us the Torah on Shavuos, on Vav Sivan, which was what day of the Omer? 50th, right? No, wrong, right? I like to trick you. Wrong. Which day? The 51st day of the Omer, right? The Gemara says in Yavamis, Moshe Hoisif Yom Echad Midaito. Moshe added a day, so the Torah was given on day 51. Right. That was the first time the Torah was given. But then what happened?
Yom Kippur.
Moshe Rabbeinu comes down with the Luchos, and he breaks the Luchos, right? So now we don't have the Torah anymore. So now Moshe Rabbeinu has to go up a second time. So he goes up first for 40 days. He comes down when on Yud Zayin Tammuz, he sees Klal Yisrael sinned with the Egel, and he took the Luchos, he broke it, and Rebbeinu Shalom gave him a big Yasher Koyach. Hashem said, Asher Shibarta, Yasher Koychach Asher Shibarta. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, we need another one. Rebbeinu Shalom says, no way, you have one chance. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes up the mountain a second time for 40 days, and he says, can we have another set of Luchos? Rebbeinu Shalom says, I'll think about it. Come up again. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes up Echad Be'elul, and he stays on the mountain for a third time for 40 days, and he comes down on what day of the year? Yom Kippur. Hashem says the magic word, Salachti Kidvarecha, and Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from Har Sinai with a second set of Luchos, and that's the Torah that we have today.
Yep.
So we got the Torah twice. The first time on the 51st day of the Omer, and the second time on the 10th day of Tishrei. By the way, we have over here, we're going to go backwards a little today, on number 22 on the sheets, we have in the Shalos Teshuvos Binyan Shlomo, Rav Shlomo HaKohen Mivilna, the author of the Cheshek Shlomo. If you look in the back of the Gemara, you have Hagoyis on many Masechtas from the Cheshek Shlomo, and he brings down a Chidush from his brother, Rabbi Tzalel HaKohen Mivilna. You look in the second paragraph. So we have 2 days of Kabbalas HaTorah, the 51st day of the Omer, and the 10th day of Tishrei. That's Merumaz in the first word of the Aseres HaDibros. What's the first word of the Aseres HaDibros? Anoichi. Aleph Nun is what? 51. That's the 51st day of the Omer. Yud Chaf, or Chaf Yud, is Yom Kippur. So Anoichi stands for the 2 days the Torah was given. Day number 1 is Aleph Nun, the 51st day of the Omer, and day number 2 is Chaf Yud, Yom Kippur. Okay, so the problem is, Rabbi Isai, if we were making the calendar, if we were the calendar clerk, and we were in charge of making the Jewish calendar, what day would we make on the calendar to celebrate Kabbalas HaTorah?
Yom Kippur.
I would make Yom Kippur.
51st.
Because the first day didn't work out, right? The first marriage was off. We had to get married again. So why celebrate a marriage that Chas v'Shalom, the Gemara says, was broken, that we were divorced from?
Yeah, but this one leads to the other.
It led to it. Why commemorate Shavuos? Instead, we should commemorate Yom Kippur. Right? If I ask you, the Torah that we have today, when we take the Torah out, so the Aron, which Torah is it? It's the Torah of Yom Kippur, it's not the Torah of Shavuos. The first Aseres HaDibros, the first Luchos, were shattered to smithereens. Right? There's nothing left of it. They're gone. We took the Shivrei Luchos, we put them in the Aron, but that's not the Torah that we have today. For all intents and purposes, the Torah we have today, we got on Yom Kippur. So why celebrate Shavuos? We should celebrate Yom Kippur. And furthermore, if you look at number 22,
the kinyan was made on Shavuos.
Yeah, but the kinyan was broken. It's like you bought the house, right? You buy a house, and then the deal didn't go through. So you had to go again and go through all the procedures again, and the second deal went through. So now when you're celebrating the anniversary of when you bought the house, you're going to celebrate from the time that you made the bad deal the first time?
So why you keep the Shiva?
You know, kiviyachol, you know? You have two people, they meet each other, they go out, and they say, you know what? We're not for each other. And then 3 years later, they get married. When's their anniversary? Right? The anniversary is the time from the first time they met. Nobody does that. So the question is, why do we celebrate Shavuos? We should celebrate Yom Kippur. Now think about the following.
Except for the Torah, though, the first time.
We accepted it. Yeah, but then God didn't accept us. Right? It didn't work out. The deal was off.
So why we
one
keep
second,
Luchos?
right?
How did we accept it the second time? Did we say
okay.
not to have an Ishmael again?
Good question. We're going to deal with that. Another thing to think about is the following. And that is, think about the difference in how we commemorate Shavuos and Yom Kippur. Shavuos, the Gemara tells us, Hakol moedim deba'atzeres ba'ina nami lachem. Everyone agrees that maybe on other Yomim Tovim, you don't have to eat and drink. You could celebrate Yom Tif by learning the whole day, by davening the whole day, right? Either Kulei Lashem, right? You could do Kulei Lashem any other Yom Tif. When it comes to the Yom Tif of Shavuos, Kulei Alma Moti, Debaina Nami Lachem. Everyone agrees you got to celebrate physically. So what does that show? That Kabbalah Satar is something you have to celebrate with your guf. What about Yom Kippur? What's Yom Kippur? The Mishnah says in Tainus, Yom Kippur is called Yom Chasuna. So the day it's a chasana. It's the day we got the second Luchos. How do we celebrate the Kabbalah Satar of Luchos Shniyos? You can't eat, you can't drink. All physical pleasures are asur. So it's very strange that the first Luchos you have to celebrate, everyone agrees you have to eat, you have to drink, you have to enjoy physically, and the second Luchos, everyone agrees you can't eat. I mean, is Torah something you celebrate physically or not celebrate physically? If you celebrate it physically, Yom Kippur should be Kesudas Achashverosh B'Shaitai. And if you're not supposed to celebrate Torah physically, then Shavuos should be like Shavas B'Tammuz. So we have this dichotomy that on the one hand you celebrate the first giving of the Torah physically, and the second giving of the Torah you celebrate it spiritually. Now Rabbi say,
why do you say that you only come upon this recently?
Why?
Yeah, you said only recently.
Rebbeinu Shalom decided that I should know this only now. Okay, so says the Ramban in Parshas Bahar. The Ramban says, very interesting. We need you here, right? You appreciate my jokes. I need you over here. You're not going. We're holding on to you. Okay. So the Ramban says in Parshas Bahar that the Ramban comments on the difference between Luchos Rishonos and Luchos Shniyos. Does anybody know what kind of deal was made by Luchos Rishonos? So Hashem told Moshe, gather the people, shecht karbanos, take the blood, sprinkle it on the people. Right? So they had to bring karbanos, they had to sprinkle the blood on the people. By Luchos Shniyos, there were no karbanos, there were no sprinkling of the blood. Okay? Just should know that. If you look at the end of Mishpatim, it talks about how they shechted karbanos, they sprinkled the blood on the people. Nothing of the sort happened by Luchos Shniyos. Says the Ramban, look at number 1 in Parshas Bahar, on the second line, Bir ha'inyan. Ki betchilas arbaim yoim harishainim shaluchos harishainos. In the beginning of the first 40 days of Luchos Rishainos, Kasav Moshe b'Sefer Habris, Moshe wrote down, Es kol divrei Hashem, ve'es kol ha'mishpatim ha'ne'amarim sham. Moshe wrote the Torah, Vayizrek dam habris ala'am, he sprinkled the blood on the people. Uchshechatu bi'egel, when the Jews sinned by the egel, v'nishtabru haluchos, and the luchos were broken. Ki'ilu nisbatla habris hahi eitzel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's as if all bets were off. It's as if the bris was broken. When Hashem re-agreed to Moshe with the second Luchos, Tzivahu bebris chadasha, he made another bris, shenemar, hinei anochi kareis bris, right? Vehechser sham ha-mitzvahs ha-chamurais shenemru beseder ve'ela ha-mishpatim bebris v'shana. And Hashem repeated the strict mitzvahs that he taught the first time. So now get a load of this. The Ramban is saying that the first time they made a bris, they shechted karbanos, they sprinkled the blood on the people. Then, when they sinned with the egel, it was as if all bets were off. It was like the deal was over. And when Hashem agreed to give the luchos a second time, Hashem reiterated to Moshe Rabbeinu the chamurais, the strict mitzvahs. So now the question is, and this question we spoke out already, but it's raised specifically by the Sefer Sam Derech. So the Sefer Sam Derech is the shmuzin of Reb Simcha Zisel Broida, Rashiva of Chevron. And he wants to know if, in fact, the deal was off after the Luchos Rishonos, why celebrate Shavuos? In fact, we should celebrate Yom Kippur. Okay. Now take a look. The Ramban continues. I broke up the Ramban for you into bite-sized pieces to make it a little easier. Take a look at number 3. Now let's talk about the second bris. V'ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu lehachmir aleihem bebris hazois hashenis. Ribbon Shalom said, you want to take 2? Take 2 is going to be more chamor. And in what way are the second luchos going to be more chamor? And this is something that I just understood very recently. Shatia aleihem ba'alais uveklalais. That the second bris will be upheld with the curses, with the teichacha. You know, you could go your whole life, you never even realize this. This past week, we read Parshas the Chukaisa. The Chukaisa is the teichacha. What is the purpose of the teichacha? You ever realize that when Hashem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael in Parshas Yisrael, there was no teichacha? The teichacha did not come until after Kisisa, the second Luchos. Says the Ramban, Yesh muktam u'muchar b'Torah. The Torah is written in chronological order. The teichacha is specifically designed for Luchos Shniyos. The Rebbe Shalom said, look, I gave you the first Luchos, and I said, here, you be mine, here's the Torah, be a good boy, keep it. So Klal Yisrael kept the Torah. But they didn't. So Rebbe Shalom says, giving you something and just leaving it up to your discretion doesn't really work. Now I say, here's the Torah, and if you don't keep the Torah, you're going to have this klala, and that klala, and this oynesh, and that oynesh. The second luchos davka were upheld with the teichacha. Because, Rebbe Shalom, the teacher comes into the room. He says, I expect everyone to behave, and, if everyone behaves, you're going to have recess scheduled. Fine. The class doesn't behave. So the teacher says, whoever misbehaves, they're going to get thrown out of the class. Right? We mean business. So Rebbe Shalom tried the first time without the teichacha, says the Ramban. It didn't work. I never realized this. Parshas Bechukaisai is dafka after Parshas Kisisa. Had it not been for the Egel, there never would have been a Bechukaisai. There's no need for a teichacha if everybody's doing what they need to do. You don't have to threaten. You don't have to impose strict punishment. The teichacha is because take 1 didn't work. The Ramban continues. That is why he says, I'll call on mitzvahs harishonos, I'll call on mishpatim, ulefikach. The Ramban goes on to say that's why at the end of the teichacha Hashem says all of these punishments are for the original deal. And which mitzvah specifically did the Rebbeinu Shalom reiterate and explain in greater depth the second time around? In other words, if you look in the beginning of Parshas Bahar is the first parsha that talks about mitzvahs, really, after the giving of the second Luchos. Which mitzvah is Rebbeinu Shalom explaining more at length in Parshas Bahar? Shemitah. Now, had Hashem taught Shemitah by Luchos Rishonos?
No.
Almost no. Very, very briefly. All you have is what? V'hashvius, tishmetena, unetasha. Just a general thing. Rabbi say on the 7th year, you're off the hook, you don't have to work. But Hashem did not go into the details. Says Ramban, the second time around, Hashem is telling Moshe, I want you to explain very clearly the details of the mitzvahs so that Klal Yisrael know we're dealing with something very serious. And Hashem reiterates and goes into greater detail specifically with Shemitah, and He gives the oynesh for Shemitah, that if you don't keep Shemitah, you're out of the land. Eretz Yisrael is contingent on Klal Yisrael keeping Shemitah. By the way, of all the chayvei lavin in the Torah, of all the lavin that are not chayiv misa, that are not chayiv kares, that are just a lav, Shemitah is the most chamor. It's the only lav in the Torah that by not keeping it, you're chayiv galas. So we have to explain. So in other words, what's happening is, the second time around, Rebbeinu Shalom is saying, you want the Torah again? You want take 2? First of all, you have to accept it with a teichacha. You have to accept it with klolos. You have to accept it with a shvua. And now I'm giving you details of mitzvahs, and specifically which mitzvah? Shemitah. And I'm giving you the most chamor mitzvah and the most chamor einish to uphold the second luchos. So Rabbi Glatstein, let's think very clearly.
I'm sorry, are you suggesting the Torah was changed?
No, the Torah was not changed. However, the details of the mitzvahs had not yet been
Promulgated.
They were not on the forefront as they were by Luchos.
That I got, but you said the Torah was not there before.
No, it was not there before. And if you think that this is a very interesting idea, that even though we say the Torah is an absolute truth, if you look in the Sforno throughout Chumash explains how many mitzvahs were given only in reaction to certain chatam that the Klal Yisrael did. For example, kosher food is only because of the Chet HaEgel. Had Klal Yisrael not sinned with the Egel, go to McDonald's. Sforno writes openly. You could go seafood. Right? And Sforno writes, it was only because of the Chet HaEgel that Hashem gave us Parsha Shmini. Then the Sforno learns it was only because of Parsha Shlach, the Meraglim, that the mitzvah of Chala was given. So even though it's a very hard concept to understand, because we always think that the mitzvahs are absolute truths, they're not contingent upon historical events or not. But you see from the Rishonim that's not necessarily the case. Pesach Sheni, exactly. Pesach Sheni.
Rebbe, wasn't that done to make us a holy people?
See, Pesach Sheni, you could say, well, the Rebbeinu Shalom knew that people would become tamei and ask for it, and therefore he gave it. But with these other things, it's a little bit of an added step, because you have to say, Rebbeinu Shalom knew that we would do a chet, so that gets into Bechira and Yediyah more. Okay? So you could say that. You could say that Rebbeinu Shalom didn't force anyone to sin, but he knew we would sin, and therefore he knew he was going to give us the mitzvah of kosher food. Okay. So Rabbi Glatstein, let's think a little bit. Why was it by Luchos Rishonos the details of the mitzvahs were not given, and by Luchos Shniyos the details of the mitzvahs were given? Take a look at number 5, a little bit more in the Ramban. Says Ramban, why by Luchos Shniyos were there no karbanos and there was no sprinkling of the blood? Says Ramban, V'loi hutzrach ata sheyizbach zvachim. It was not necessary the second time around to bring karbanos. The yizroi chatzi hadam al ha'am, and to sprinkle part of the blood on the people. The chatzi hadam al mizbeach, and the half of the blood on the mizbeach. Kasher asa b'rishayna. Instead of having the blood sprinkled on them, what did the Rebbeinu Shalom do? He said, forget the blood, except the toichacha. Kiblu aval kiblu aleim habris harishayna ba'alais uvaklalis ela. They accepted upon them the first covenant with this curse, and this is the meaning of the pasuk that Hashem gave a bris between him and Klal Yisrael on Har Sinai. Okay. Alos was like a shvua. They took a shvua that they're going to keep it, and the klala was they accepted upon themselves punishment.
בברית הראשונה או בברית השנייה?
ברית שנייה.
זה ראשונה.
No. They accepted the first covenant. Okay, it's good diak. Very good diak. Don't ignore that diak. They accepted the first deal with added incentive. Okay, but you're saying very good. You see, I try to read it quickly and fool you, but Reb Shlomo chapped it. Okay, hold on to that. Okay. So now the question we want to know is, why by the first Luchos did they accept it with sprinkling the blood and karbanos? And the second deal they accepted with the teichacha, with the alois and the shois, and the kolis. Okay. They did. Parshas B'chukaisai. I mean, maybe it was was it against their will?
Did they take a vote?
Okay, we'll see. Were they even there? Question is, were they even at Har Sinai when Hashem gave us the second Luchos? Were there any Jews there? We know by Luchos Rishonos, it was like, thunder and lightning show. Everyone was gathered. 3 million Jews were watching. Parcha Nishmasam. Their souls left them. They royan es hakoilos. It was an amazing show. And everybody said, what? Nasa v'nishma. And the Malach HaShos came, they put crowns on our head. And by Luchos Shniyos, it seems like no one showed up. Was anyone even there? Were there any Jews at Har Sinai by Luchos Shniyos? And the answer is, no. There was no one there. What happened? Where were they? Where'd they go? You hear this? The Torah that we have today, we didn't even show up. You would think they would learn their lesson the first time. The first time what happened? They were late. That's why we have to stay up Shavuos night, right? That's where the minute comes from. So second time they said, oh, you don't want us to be late? We're not coming, right? They didn't show. It was a no-show. So the question is, why was it a no-show? Listen to this. Says the Ramban. Nobody was allowed to be there. They weren't invited. Why didn't you come to the chasana? Nobody told me about it. I wasn't invited. Says the Ramban. Take a look at number 7. Ve'ish lo yale imach. Now listen, this is in Parshas Kisisa, right? Ve'ish lo yale imach v'gam ish al yera b'chol ha'har. No, gam hatzana b'kor al yeru el mo. Shkayach el mo ha'harahu. Yeah. Ve'ish lo yale imach. Moshe, no one could go up with you. Really? The first time around, did anyone go up with Moshe? You bet. The Torah says the Canaan went up part of the mountain, a little bit. Aaron went up a little more. Right? There was a hierarchy. There were people who went up the mountain with Moshe. They didn't go mamish to the top, but Moshe was on the top. There's a Canaan were on a little bit part way up. Where were the people? By Yisyatzvu, Besachtes are. They were at the bottom of the mountain.
Wait a minute, we went only 10 tfachim, no?
I don't know. They were somewhere. They were on the mountain. This time, Be'ish loy yale imach. No one could go up with you, says the Ramban. Shelo yalu imacha klal ziknei Yisrael kasher asab luchos rishonos. None of the zikanim could go up. What about klal Yisrael? V'gam ish al yera b'chol ha'har. Gam b'tz'ah. Now, right? They can't even go up on the whole mountain. Gam b'tachtes ha'har. Even on the bottom of the mountain. Makoy mamed Yisrael b'rishona. The place where klal Yisrael went up the first time. So you hear this? The zikanim, they can't go up. The rest of klal Yisrael can't go to the foot of the mountain. What about the animals? Were the animals invited the first time around?
No.
So the first time around, we were a little liberal. The animals couldn't go up on the mountain, but they were allowed to graze around the mountain. As long as they're not touching the mountain, you could bring the cows, the sheep, so they could come. If you want, during Kabbalah Satah, you want to keep an eye on the sheep, they're not too far behind. But this time, Gam, Hatsoin, V'habakar, Al Yeru, not Al Hahar, El Mularahu. They can't even graze in the parameters. They can't even graze opposite the mountain. Whoa, so now, I did not realize these diyukim in the pasuk. You hear this? Luchos Rishonos, Moshe went up, Zakanim went up, Aaron went up, Klal Yisrael was on the foot of the mountain. Even the animals could come. Even the animals were invited. The second time, nobody. Not Aaron, not Zakanim, not Klal Yisrael, not the animals. The animals had to be further away. You know why? Now if I were to ask you, which was a more elevated spiritual experience? The first giving of the Torah or the second? Which was holier? The answer is...
First.
Second. Why? Why? Says the Ramban, because the first luchos were for Klal Yisrael. The second one were only because of Moshe's tefillah. So who's greater? Klal Yisrael collectively or Moshe as an individual? Says Ramban, Moshe Rabbeinu was greater because Moshe Rabbeinu was greater even than the collective parts of Klal Yisrael. So the first time around, Moshe says, you want the Torah? I'm coming, but I can't give you everything. I can't show everything. I can't have such a high level experience. So you're all invited. Everyone could come. Moshe, you go up to the top. Zakanim, you go a little bit less. Klal Yisrael, you go to the bottom of the mountain. The animals can hang around. But says Ramban, the second time, it was only for Moshe Rabbeinu. Do you find anywhere in the Chumash where Hashem says He wants to destroy Klal Yisrael? And then Moshe comes down and he tells Klal Yisrael. So Klal Yisrael, Hashem wants to destroy us. They put up kol koires in all the shuls. Right? Right here, you hear ye. Klal Yisrael should know. Then a few days, Hashem is going to destroy us. Everyone, Lech Kenosis Kol HaYehudim, and everyone's going to fast, and everyone's going to do tshuva. No. In fact, Klal Yisrael didn't even know they were going to be destroyed. Everything remained between Moshe and Hashem. Who davened? Not Klal Yisrael, only Moshe. So the second Luchos were achieved only by Moshe Rabbeinu. Luchos Shniyos were only to Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore it was a much higher experience. Look what he writes. Look what he says. Look at number 7. These are amazing words. The first time, no one could touch it in Behema Amish. They still were warned by the first original warning. Right? So the Ramban says a few words later, Aval ata, but now, Hichmir b'shas matan haluchos ha'elu yoiser mimayim harishayin. But now the Rebbeinu Shalom was much more machmir about Kabbalas HaTorah than the first time. Why? V'hatam b'chol zeh, ki barishonos haya hamayimid bavor kol Yisrael. The first time around it was for the entirety of the Jewish people. V'zeh l'Moshe bilvad. Luchos shnias were only for Moshe, bizchusai, in his merit, uvet filasai. And now the Ramban paraphrases a pasuk in, I think, Chagai. Begadol hiya hakavod hanigla alahar ha'achron min harishon. There was more glory of God second time around than the first time. The first time was for everyone. Everyone, not everyone was on such a high level. So Rebbe Shalom limited his revelation. The second time.
The first one was panim ul panim, no?
Second time even more.
Yeah?
Second time even more. So comes Rav Simcha Zisel Broida, Rashiv of Hebron, and he asks a very interesting question. The first time Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from Har Sinai, what does he look like? He looks like Moshe Rabbeinu. Nothing out of the ordinary. He looks the way he always looked. Nothing changed about the appearance of Moshe Rabbeinu.
No, the light was coming out of him.
But the second time around in Parshas Kisisa, it says, Ki karan ar panav. He had emanations of light that shone out of his head. So ask Rav Simcha Zisel, why is it the first time Moshe Rabbeinu's appearance didn't change, and the second time all of a sudden his face glowed? Says Rav Simcha Zisel, you have to know the Ramban, because the experience of Luchos Shnios was a much higher, more elevated spiritual experience. It was much more intimate with the Rebbeinu Shalom. No one was allowed to be there, not Aaron, not the Zakanim, not Klal Yisrael, not the animals. So therefore it elevated Moshe Rabbeinu even greater than did Luchos V'Shainos. Unbelievable. Yeah, we don't realize that the psukim that talk about the shine of Moshe's face was only in Parshas Kisisa. Only by Luchos Shnios. Okay. So Rabbi Isai, now we have to understand when Moshe Rabbeinu came down with Luchos Shnios. Yeah? What did Klal Yisrael say? Did they say, right? Did they say Nasa v'nishma? We don't find any reaction.
No.
What did they say? Thank you?
No.
Did they say, you know, that Hashem went to all the Umay Sa'ilam and he offered them the Torah. So, you know, the Western world, they said, what is it? You can't kill. Forget it. You know, the other nations, they can't commit adultery. So he went to Klal Yisrael. He said, how much does it cost? Yeah? It's free. So he said, we'll take two. Yeah.
We got to.
Nah. Thank you. Okay. So the Ramban says like this. Look at number 10. The Ramban in Parshas Kisisa says, what did Klal Yisrael say about Luchos Shnios? Kesoiv l'chas hadvar ma'ila. Says Ramban, Tziva, the second time around Hashem commanded, sheyichtov sefer bris, that he should write the Torah again, v'yikra oisei b'aznei am, and Hashem tells Moshe, v'kabluhu aleihem b'nasa v'nishma, kasher asa b'rishana. And Hashem says, I want them to say nasa v'nishma like the first time. Says Ramban, ki kol ha'maisa shahoy b'luchos rishonos, whatever happened the first time, yirtzel l'shnoisa imam b'luchos hashnios, Hashem wanted to repeat it the second time. Did the Jews say nasa v'nishma? Says Ramban, ve'ein safek she'asa kain. There's no doubt that they did so. So why doesn't the Torah tell us? Because the Torah is saving space. The Torah only has 600,000 oisios. So how many times does it have to say nasa v'nishma? The Torah understands. If they said it the first time, we could safely presume they did it the second time, even though the Torah doesn't say it. This is an example of the rule.
But they weren't there.
Divrei Torah.
You said
They weren't there, but Moshe gave it to them. They also accepted it willingly. This is an example of Divrei Torah. Shiurim b'makom echad v'aniyim b'makom echad. Right? You have to extrapolate. If they said it the first time, says Ramban, we could safely presume they said it the second time. Okay. Now let's take a look for a moment at the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos says on the pasuk on page 2, number 11, by Yisiyatsu b'tachtis sahar, they stood on the bottom of the mountain. Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa melamed shekaf HaKadosh Baruch Aleim sahar kegigas. Hashem suspended the mountain over our heads like a barrel. Amar lahem im atem makama Torah mutav. If you accept the Torah, good. The imlav sham tehei kfuraschem. So Gemara says, well, wait a second. If the Rebbeinu Shalom forced us to accept the Torah, so it wasn't a real deal, right? It's like a gunshot deal. Hashem Kaviyachal forced us into it. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov Mikan Maida Rabba La'iraisa. From here we have a big escape hatch. In other words, the Rebbeinu Shem can't really punish us for violating the Torah because we never said yes. It was a gunshot deal. Hashem says, "You want the Torah? Yeah. Otherwise, I'm going to drop the mountain on your head." So anytime Klal Yisrael doesn't accept the Torah, doesn't keep the Torah, we always have an escape hatch. Then the Gemara says, "No, but ultimately we accepted the Torah willingly in the times of Achashverosh, like the pasuk says, Kimu v'kiblu hayudim." Frek Tosfos, what do you mean Mikan Moida Rabba La'iraisa? What do you mean the Jews have an escape hatch? What do you mean they could always say, "You forced us into it"? But 40 years later, when they're at the precipice of entering Eretz Yisrael, they took upon themselves the Toichecha in Parshas Kisavai, in Parshas Nitzavim, and they accepted the Torah, Be'alo v'Shvua. So even though Har Sinai was a gunshot deal, even though Hashem forced the Torah on us 40 years earlier, but 40 years later we accepted it willingly at the feet of the Yarden. So how could the Gemara say that we're not really compelled to accept the Torah, that if we violate the Torah, Hashem we have an excuse, we accepted it willingly 40 years later? Answers Tosfos. We didn't do this part last time. Answers Tosfos. L'maisa, Hashem told us we have to accept the Teichacha the second time around. So since Hashem told us, that's considered Bal Karchach. Right? Look at Tosfos number 12. The end, 3 lines to the end. Amar Rabbeinu Tam, the Alpi Hadibur Haya. The klalos of Har Grizim and Har Eval were because of the word of Hashem. V'harei kebal karcham. And it's as if that's also a gunshot deal. That's not, we didn't willingly accept Parshas Kisavai Nitzavim. Hashem told us to. That's not called, it's like somebody comes to you. Listen. You're going to do it, right? You're going to do it, right? So even if they don't have a gun to your head, you're going to give it to them. But they're not forcing you. That's forcing. That's for you don't have to have the mountain suspended over their heads to be considered Bal Karchach. So 40 years later is also against the will. Ask Reb Simcha Zisol, what happened to Tosfos? Did Tosfos forget about the first Teichacha? Why doesn't Tosfos ask, what do you mean Har Sinai was a gunshot deal? But Luchos we accepted without the mountain suspended over our head. Why is Tosfos only asking from the Teichacha 40 years later by Har Grizim and Har Eval as they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael? Tosfos should ask a better question. Very nice, the mountain was suspended over the heads, but by Luchos there was no mountain suspended over their heads. So Rabbi Glatstein, fasten your seatbelts. In the Ramban, in the next 6 lines, he's going to change forever your understanding of the Luchos. Unbelievable words of the Ramban. An amazing thing. Let's say you have 2 countries, yeah? They make a peace treaty. 2 countries make a peace treaty, Germany and Russia. Let's say one country violates the treaty. So is that country now allowed to continue to violate the treaty? I mean, do we say once one country violates the treaty, they could continue because the treaty is off? No. The treaty is still on. But if one country violates the treaty, it's the other country that's now allowed to violate it. How does a treaty work? How does a bris work? You have 2 parties. They both have to agree to the deal. If party A breaks the deal and doesn't follow the deal, they're still bound by the treaty. It's the other party that's now free to release themselves from the treaty. Because why? If party A violates the treaty, party B says, all bets are off. But for party A, the deal is still on. So listen to what the Ramban says. I'll tell you outside, then we'll read inside. Bnei Shalom and Klal Yisrael made a deal. Hashem said to Klal Yisrael, here, take the Torah. You keep the Torah, I guard you, I watch over you. We didn't keep our end of the deal. Why? We sinned with the Egel. So now, could Klal Yisrael continue to sin? No. We're still bound by the deal. We have a deal with the Rebbeinu Shalom that if we keep the Torah, He'll protect us, and if we don't, He won't. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom who could break the deal. God could break the deal. We violated it, so He could back out. We cannot back out. We're still bound by the deal. That's how, right? If you know the legalities of treaties, if you know the legalities of a bris, if party A violates it, party B could back out, not party A. So Klal Yisrael sinned with the Egel. We're still bound by Luchos Rishonos. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom who could say all bets are off. Luchos Shniyos. Klal Yisrael doesn't have to be there. We didn't show up. We didn't say Nasa v'Nishma. And the Rebbeinu Shalom never asked our opinion. It doesn't matter what our opinion is. We already accepted Luchos Rishonos. We have to keep the first Torah that was given on Vav Sivan. It's God who backed out of it after Luchos Rishonos. Yeah.
How is breaking different from backing up?
It's not. If one party breaks the treaty, the other party could back out. The other party could say, "I'm not bound by it anymore." Because
you're not backing out.
you're back. You violated it, and you could be you're liable to repercussions. But you're still bound by it. You can't continue to break it. You have a treaty. You have a deal. You have a bris. It's the other party who's no longer bound by it. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says like this, says Ramban. After Klal Yisrael sinned by the Egel, does Klal Yisrael have to keep the Torah? 1,000%. Just because they violated it once, they have to make sure they continue to keep it from here on. It's Rebbeinu Shalom who could back out. And the Rebbeinu Shalom said, I'm out. I'm out of the deal. All bets are off. You guys keep the Torah, and I don't have to guard you. I don't have to protect you. You broke it. I'm out of the deal. When Hashem decided maybe to rejoin and recommit himself to the deal, you know what he tells Moshe? Moshe, you're my mediator. You're my middleman. I will only commit myself to that original deal provided that the Jews now agree to uphold the deal with the Taisacha, with the Alos and Kalos. In other words, there's no second giving of the Torah. The Torah was given once. From the vantage point of the Jewish people, the Torah was given one time. Luchos Rishonos. We only got one Torah. We only have one deal with the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's Luchos Rishonos. Luchos Shniyos was only for God. And that's why He was the only one who showed up. We didn't have to come. We're bound by the original deal. Look at number 14. Look at these words in Ramban. Ramban says like this. V'hanochoin be'enai. He says the correct interpretation. Ki ba'avur she'Yisrael heim ha'choitim. Because the Jews are the sinners. V'ha'oivrim al habris. They were the ones who violated the treaty. Hutzrach HaKadosh Baruch Hu lechadesh lahem bris chadasha. Hashem had to make a new deal. Look at these words. Sheloi yafer hu lahem brisai. So that the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't break the deal. Luchos Shniyos were only for God, they weren't for us. So therefore Hashem says, Moshe, what's your role? Your role is you're the Shashvinan, you're the Unterführer, you're the mediator, you're the middleman. Says the Ramban, V'amar LaMoshe sheyichtav hatnan. Hashem tells Moshe, you write the deal, you write the stipulations. V'zetam ki halpi hadvarim ha'ele karati itcha. Bris! Yes, Yisrael. My deal with Klal Yisrael now is only because of you, not because of them. They're bound, they're tied, they're attached from the first time. They're married to me and I'm not married to them. You hear such a thing? How's that possible? That's the definition of a treaty. That when one party backs out of a deal, that party is still bound, it's the other party that can back out. Now, Rabbi Glatstein, take a look back at the first Ramban. We glanced over it without appreciating what the Ramban was saying. Look on the fourth line. On the fourth line in the first Ramban. Uchshechatu b'egel. When they sinned by the Egel, b'nishtabru haluchos, and the Luchos were broken, ke'ilu nizbatla habris hahi. Look at the next two words, they're the whole Shiur. Eitzel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we sinned by the Egel, it was as if the bris was broken, not for us. We still have to keep Shabbos, we still have to keep Milah, we still have to keep Pesach. It's Rebbeinu Shalom who has no responsibilities to us. We broke it, He's relinquished. The Luchos Shniyos were only for God. So now the Ramban explains, what was Klal Yisrael's reaction to Luchos Shniyos? So his first shot was, they probably said Nasa v'Nishma also. Now the Ramban saying, you know what the reaction was? Who cares? Doesn't matter what the reaction is. It's none of their business. This is not a deal with them. It's only God committing Himself to them. There's nothing they have to do. They're already committed. Says Ramban, now I understand. By the first deal, they shechted karbanos and they sprinkled the blood on the people. Why? Because that was the only deal the Klal Yisrael ever made. In other words, we have to look at it from two vantage points. There's a vantage point of God, there's a vantage point of the people. From the vantage point of the people, the deal was sealed after the first time, after they sprinkled the blood, after they brought the karbanos. Anything they needed to do was already sealed after time. But the thing is, since they violated the deal, Ribono Shel Olam could relinquish himself. So Hashem says, you know what? I want to commit myself. Moshe Rabbeinu, you're my mediator. You come up to Har Sinai. But I don't want the Jews to be there. There's no Zakanim, there's no Aaron. Once it's only you, it's a much more elevated experience. That's why you're going to be more elevated than you were the first time. That's why after the second time, you're going to be shining with Karnei Hod. That's why the Canaan can't come, and Aaron can't come, and Klal Yisrael can't come. It's just between me and you, because in terms of Klal Yisrael, they're overdone with. Yeah. For them, Shavuos is everything. For me, I need a Yom Kippur. I need a Yom Kippur. Not Klal Yisrael. There was no reaction at all when Moshe Rabbeinu came down with Luchos to Klal Yisrael. So Klal Yisrael said, what are these? Moshe Rabbeinu said, none of your business. I'll tell you, they happen to be Luchos Shniyos. Luchos Shniyos, what happened? No, don't worry, you don't need to know about it. You have the Luchos Rishonos, they happen to be broken, but that's only from the Ribono Shel Olam's point of view. From your point of view, Luchos Shniyos is not really that critical. It's Hashem's commitment to you, not your acceptance. That's why the second time around, there are no karbanos, there's no sprinkling of the blood. So Rabbi say, that explains why the second time around, first of all, there was a teichacha. The teichacha is only from Hashem's point of view. That Hashem is saying, I only commit to you if you heighten the repercussions. If you accept these heightened repercussions. And Hashem adds the details of the mitzvahs. Because if you want me to be committed to you, I'm putting out on the forefront, these mitzvahs have pratim. Okay, so let me just share with you one final suggestion. And that is, first of all, now we understand perfectly why we celebrate Shavuos and not Yom Kippur. What do you mean? The Luchos were broken. No. From our vantage point, we only have one day of Kabbalas HaTorah. And that is Shavuos. That was the day we committed ourselves to keep the Torah. Yom Kippur, it's not our business. Yom Kippur is not the down here's business. Yom Kippur is up there's business. That was Ribono Shel Olam committing himself to us. So we could just add very beautifully, now we understand why Shavuos hakol moedim deba'ina nami lachem. Shavuos, everybody agrees that you have to celebrate physically. And Yom Kippur, everybody agrees you can't eat anything. Why? Because Shavuos is from the vantage point of Klal Yisrael. Yeah. We are physical beings. We live here on this world. We don't live in Shamayim. We're human beings. We're basar v'dam. How do we show our happiness and simcha? By eating and drinking. That's the only way we know how to do it. What are we going to do? We're going to fast? Most people don't get a big thrill out of fasting. So therefore, Shavuos hakol moedim debayina nami lachem. Yom Kippur, you say, if you have to celebrate physically, so why don't we celebrate Yom Kippur physically? The answer is Yom Kippur is Ribono Shel Olam's business. Yom Kippur is a day from the vantage point of Ribono Shel Olam. From the vantage point of Ribono Shel Olam, the way we commemorate that is in a more heavenly type of way. From his vantage point, from his point of view, the way it's celebrated is being separating from physical pleasures, not eating, not drinking, and so forth. So this gives us a completely different appreciation. Why does Tosfos not ask? Tosfos should have asked, what do you mean we were forced to accept the Torah, but we accepted the Teichacha by Luchos Shniyos? Nah, that wasn't our acceptance. That wasn't from our vantage point. That wasn't from our point of view. That had nothing to do with us. That's the only... Now listen carefully. When we got to the Yarden, and by Har Grizim and Har Eval, that was from both vantage points. There, we renewed the original covenant from both stadim, from our tzad and from the Ribono Shel Olam tzad. So therefore, Tosfos asks, 40 years later, Klal Yisrael accepted the Torah, ba'alo v'shvo. But not the first time around. The first time around, it wasn't asked to us. It wasn't posed to us. Hashem didn't ask what our opinion was. So why doesn't it say Nasa v'nishma the second time? There was no Nasa v'nishma. Rebbeinu Shalom didn't ask what we thought. So again, according to Ramban, let's just get clear. The Ramban learns the Torah was given the first time around. Klal Yisrael said Nasa v'nishma. When we sinned by the Egel, let's just look at one more thing. The Ramban doesn't say the deal was off. Look carefully on the fourth line in number 1. Uchshechatu be'egel v'nishtabru haluchos ke'ilu nispatla. It's as if it was off. It wasn't off. It was as if it was off. So it was as if it was off, but only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Klal Yisrael were already committed, right? We already need to be committed from the first time around. Yeah? Then Rebbeinu Shalom said, fine, I will commit myself through the Teichacha. The Rebbeinu Shalom committed himself, but as far as we're concerned, the day of celebrating Kabbalas HaTorah is the Yom Tov of Shavuos. Yom Kippur is Mitzvah, the Rebbeinu Shalom from Hashem's point of view. Yom Kippur is a day of fasting. Shavuos is a day that Hakol Moedim, Deba'inan, Nami, Lachem Rabbi Glatstein. Have a wonderful day. Shkaya.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.